She was left in chains on the day meant for her vows, humiliated, broken, and abandoned, until a stranger shattered her bonds with a promise of forever. But is he her savior, or a new kind of captivity she can't yet see? The church bells of Willow Creek tolled hollow in the September air, their notes more suited for mourning than celebration. Inside the wooden chapel, the gathered townsfolk whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes fixed on the bride at the altar. Ilara Quinn stood bound at the wrists, iron chains gleaming against her white dress. The bouquet had been forced into her grip, stems bruising her palms, while her groom, Ephraim Harlow, the wealthiest cattle baron in the territory, watched her with smug satisfaction. His victory was not in love, but in ownership. The preacher cleared his throat, his voice cracking as he attempted to press forward. "We are gathered here." Ilara barely heard him. Her heart pounded louder than the bells, each word of scripture blurred with the rattle of the chains. She had once dreamed of a wedding filled with freedom, laughter, and the promise of partnership. Instead, she had been paraded like a prize, shackled to prove she belonged to Harlow. A murmur rippled through the crowd as the chapel doors creaked open. Dust swirled in the shaft of light that cut across the aisle. A tall stranger stepped in, his hat pulled low, his boots carrying the dust of long miles. His gaze swept the room before resting on her. Ephraim bristled, jaw tightening. "This is a private ceremony," he barked. The stranger did not flinch. He moved forward with quiet authority, the kind that made men shift uncomfortably on their benches. He stopped before the altar, his eyes meeting Ilara's. Something in his look was steady, unyielding, a promise she hadn't dared hope for. "Remove those chains," the man said, his voice carrying across the chapel. Gasps erupted. Ephraim's face darkened with rage. "You've no place here, drifter. She's mine, by law and by vow." The stranger's hand moved to the knife at his belt. With one swift step, he reached Ilara's side. Before Ephraim could react, steel flashed, and the chains clattered to the wooden floor. The sound echoed like gunfire in the stunned silence. Ilara's breath caught. For the first time in weeks, her wrists were free. She lifted her eyes to him, barely whispering, "Why?" He offered his hand, his voice low but resolute. "Because no woman belongs in chains. Walk with me, and you'll never stand alone again." The congregation erupted into shouts, some in outrage, others in awe. Ephraim roared, lunging forward, but the stranger turned, shielding Ilara with his broad frame. For a heartbeat, time froze. She had a choice: step back into captivity, or grasp the hand that offered freedom. Her fingers trembled as they touched him. Hope, fragile, defiant, flickered inside her. The world outside that chapel suddenly seemed wide enough for possibility. The bells tolled again, but this time the sound rang differently in her ears. Not like mourning, like a call to something new. If you've ever seen a life change in a single heartbeat, wait until you see where Ilara's first step with the stranger will take her. The chapel dissolved into chaos the moment Ilara's fingers laced with the stranger's. Ephraim Harlow bellowed, shoving pews aside as he lunged toward them. Townsfolk shrieked, some scattering toward the doors while others stayed, hungry for spectacle. The stranger pulled Ilara close and guided her swiftly down the aisle. "Keep your eyes forward," he murmured. His grip was steady, unshaken by the storm of outrage around them. Ilara's skirts tangled around her ankles as she hurried, heart pounding with every echo of Ephraim's boots behind them. The chains lay abandoned at the altar, but Ephraim's fury promised a heavier weight if they faltered. They burst out of the chapel into the blinding noon. Sunday horses pawed nervously at their hitching posts, sensing the upheaval. The stranger swung into his saddle in one smooth motion, then extended a hand. "Ride," he urged. Ilara hesitated only a breath before clasping his palm. He lifted her effortlessly, settling her before him. The moment his arm encircled her, the world shifted. Behind them came shouts, men calling for rifles, women crying for order. Then, the crack of Ephraim's voice. "Bring them back alive!" The stranger spurred his horse hard. Hooves struck sparks against stone as they thundered down Main Street. Dust rose in their wake, veiling them from the angry mob. Elara clung to him, her veil whipping loose in the wind. "Who are you?" she shouted, above the pounding hooves. "Call me Rylan," he answered, his voice clipped but certain. "We'll talk once we're clear." Bullets cracked through the air. Splinters flew from the post beside them. Elara gasped, ducking lower. Rylan leaned forward, urging the horse into a faster gallop, weaving them toward the open plains. Behind, riders scrambled to mount. But the chase faltered. Few could match the pace of Rylan's black stallion, its muscles surging with every stride. Within minutes, the church bells and Ephraim's roars faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of escape. Only when the town shrank to a smudge on the horizon did Rylan slow the horse. He guided them into a dry gulch, the red cliffs rising like guardians around them. Elara's chest heaved with the shock of freedom. She pressed her raw wrists together, feeling where iron had bruised her skin. Rylan dismounted and reached up to steady her as she slid down. For the first time, she stood before him fully. Dust clung to his coat, his jawline was rough with travel, and his eyes, steel gray beneath the brim of his hat, carried a weight she couldn't name. "You've risked your life," Elara said, her voice trembling. "For me. Why?" He met her gaze, calm but firm. "Because no man has the right to chain a woman and call it love. I've seen too many prisons built from pride and wealth." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken of her suffering so plainly. Above them, a hawk circled in the wide blue sky. The air smelled of dust and sage, sharp and wild. Elara realized the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was hers to walk. Rylan tightened the cinch on his saddle, his voice steady. "Ephraim won't stop. We need ground he can't control. If you're willing, I'll see you safe." Elara lifted her chin. Fear still coiled in her belly, but hope pressed stronger. "Then I'll ride with you." By dusk, the gulch had cooled, the cliffs casting long shadows across the scrubland. Rylan built a small fire, shielding the flame with flat stones so it would not betray their position. Elara sat opposite him, fingers trembling as she rubbed warmth into her arms. Her wedding gown, torn from the frantic ride, looked more like a shroud than a garment of joy. She plucked at the fabric with a bitter laugh. "I should have burned this the moment he put it on me." Rylan's gaze lingered on the fire. Cloths just clothes. Chains are heavier in the mind than on the wrists. Elara studied him. His words carried experience, not speculation. "You've been in chains too," she said softly. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back against a stone and tipped his hat lower. "What matters is that you're free now, and we'll keep it that way." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the call of a distant coyote. For the first time since the chapel, Elara allowed herself to breathe, without the bite of fear pressing her chest. Yet questions pressed at her tongue. "You knew nothing of me," she said finally. "Why risk Ephraim's wrath? He owns half the county. Men whisper his name like it's law." Rylan's eyes lifted, steady and unflinching. "Law bends to the highest bidder. Justice doesn't. I ride for the latter." Elara's breath caught at the conviction in his tone. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the stallion shifted nervously. Its ears pricked toward the horizon. Rylan stood instantly, scanning the darkening plain. "Riders," he muttered. Elara rose too, heart leaping. Against the fading light, silhouettes appeared, 5, maybe 6 men on horseback, riding hard. Dust trailed them like smoke. "Ephraim's men?" she whispered. "Who else?" Rylan's jaw tightened. He doused the fire with his boot, plunging them into near darkness. "We ride." Elara scrambled to the horse, fear flooding her veins. Rylan swung into the saddle, then pulled her up with one arm, the ease of the motion born of long years on the trail. The stallion surged forward, hooves thundering across the dry earth. Behind them, the riders shouted, spurring their mounts faster. Ilara clung to Rylan, her veil torn away by the wind, her hair whipping like fire in the moonlight. Shots cracked through the night. Dirt sprayed near the stallion's hooves. Rylan swerved sharply, guiding them toward the jagged rocks that cut across the land. "Hold tight," he commanded. They plunged into the maze of boulders, the stallion weaving with uncanny precision. Bullets ricocheted off stone, but the riders hesitated, their larger horses balking at the narrow paths. By the time the moon climbed high, the shouts had faded. Rylan slowed only when they reached a canyon where shadows swallowed them whole. He dismounted, listening to the silence. "They'll be back," he said grimly. "Men like Harlow don't forgive humiliation. Tonight was only a taste." Ilara slid down, her legs unsteady but her spirit fiercer than before. She looked at Rylan, this stranger who had shattered her chains and now risked his life to shield her. "Then let them come," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I won't go back in chains. Not ever." Rylan's gaze softened for the first time. "Good. That fire in you will carry farther than my horse ever could." The canyon wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of freedom and the warning of battles yet to come. The canyon wall shielded them until dawn, but when the first light spilled across the stone, Rylan stirred the stallion awake. "We can't linger," he said, fastening the saddle. "They'll comb every canyon in the county." Ilara rose stiffly from where she'd slept against the rocks, her dress dirt-stained, her body weary. Yet a new steadiness coursed through her, born of the night's flight, and her vow never to wear chains again. They rode north, the air sharpening with pine as the land shifted from dry scrub to rolling hills. Hours passed in silence, until they reached a creek shaded by cottonwoods. Rylan dismounted to water the horse, and Ilara knelt to wash her wrists in the cool stream. The bruises were stark against her pale skin. She caught him watching. "Do they remind you of something?" she asked quietly. Rylan's gaze lingered, shadowed. "Of choices I made long ago, and the price of letting others bind you." His words carried weight heavier than the iron she had shed. "Tell me," she pressed. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned against a tree, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I once wore shackles of my own, not for love, but for survival. A rancher took me in when I was young, said he'd raise me like kin, but his care came at the cost of obedience. When I finally broke free, I swore I'd never watch another soul live in chains." Ilara studied him, understanding dawn. "So when you saw me at the altar, I saw myself," he finished simply. Her throat tightened. For the first time since she'd met him, she felt the depth of his solitude, the kind that scars a man but steals him too. Before she could speak, the stallion snorted, ears twitching. Rylan straightened instantly. Hoofbeats carried on the wind, distant but growing. "They've split their search," he said grimly. "We'll have to outthink them." He led her along the creek bed, using the water to mask their tracks. They moved quickly, weaving between willows until the sound of pursuit faded. Still, Rylan's eyes scanned the ridges, wary of ambush. By late afternoon, they reached an abandoned homestead, a sagging cabin with shutters hanging loose, a field overtaken by weeds. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney, but its walls offered shelter. Inside, dust coated the floor, and broken glass littered the hearth. Ilara traced her fingers across a cracked mantel, where a family once displayed photographs. "Whoever lived here left in a hurry," she murmured. Rylan set his hat aside and checked the windows. "War does that. Bandits, drought. People leave when the land stops loving them back." Ilara sank into a chair, exhaustion weighing heavy. Yet beneath the fatigue was a spark she hadn't felt in years, freedom mixed with determination. "I won't be Ephraim's possession again, even if he burns the world to find me." Rylan crouched before her, his voice steady as stone. "He'll try. but as long as I draw breath, he'll never lay a hand on you." The fire in his eyes left her breathless. For the first time since childhood, Elara felt not just saved, but seen. Beyond the broken windows, thunder rolled in the distance, heralding storms neither of them could yet name. The sky darkened quickly, swollen clouds rolling across the hills with a menace that matched the unease in Elara's chest. By the time she and Ryland secured the stallion inside the cabin's lean-to, rain hammered the roof like bullets. Inside, the wind howled through broken shutters, rattling loose boards. Ryland stoked a fire in the cracked hearth, its glow pushing back shadows but unable to quiet the storm's fury. Elara wrapped herself in a moth-eaten quilt she'd found in a trunk. The damp chill clung to her bones, yet it was not the weather that made her tremble. Lightning split the sky, followed by a thunderclap so loud it rattled the walls. Elara flinched. The sound dragged her back to the chapel, to chains clattering at her feet, to Ephraim's voice promising she'd never escape. She pressed her hands to her ears, whispering, "I can't go back. I won't." Ryland noticed. He moved to her side, kneeling. "Storms pass," he said gently. Her voice cracked. "Ephraim won't. You don't know the lengths he'll go." "I know the kind of man he is," Ryland replied, steady as bedrock. "And I've faced worse. Chains break. So do tyrants." His certainty cut through her fear like a blade. Elara met his gaze, finding no doubt their only promise. The thunder eased its grip on her chest, though rain still lashed the roof. For a while, they sat in silence, the storm raging outside while the fire painted them in flickering gold. Then, to distract herself, Elara asked softly, "Did you leave someone behind? Family? A woman waiting?" Ryland shook his head, eyes fixed on the flames. "I left only ghosts. People I couldn't save. That's why I keep writing. Some debts can't be paid, but maybe they can be honored." Elara felt the weight of his confession. He carried his own chains, invisible but heavy. "Maybe saving me is part of that," she said, her voice steadier. Ryland's gaze lifted to hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a thread pulled taut, fragile, yet undeniable. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Both froze. Rain still battered the roof, but the knock came again, firm, deliberate. Ryland motioned Elara back and drew his revolver, moving with silent precision toward the door. He eased it open an inch. On the porch stood a man in a sodden coat, water dripping from his hat brim. His smile was thin, too practiced. "Evening," he drawled. "Storm's a nasty one. Mind if I warm myself by your fire?" Ryland's grip tightened on the revolver. Behind the man, faint shapes shifted in the rain, horses, riders. Elara's pulse spiked. "Ephraim's men," she whispered. The stranger tipped his hat, revealing cold eyes that glittered in the firelight. "Mr. Harlow sends his regards. He'll have the lady back, one way or another." Ryland stepped fully into the doorway, his voice iron. "He'll have to step through me first." Lightning lit the sky, thunder rolling like a war drum. The storm outside was fierce, but the storm about to break inside was fiercer still. The man at the doorway smirked, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Best not make this hard, friend. Mr. Harlow's generous. He's willing to forget your insult at the chapel if you hand the girl over now." Ryland leveled his revolver, unmoved. "Tell Harlow there's no bargain to be made." The stranger chuckled low. "Didn't figure you for a fool, but maybe I was wrong." He stepped back, raising 2 fingers. Shapes moved in the storm, 3 riders dismounting, rifles gleaming even in the dim rainlight. Elara's heart pounded as she clutched the quilt tighter around her. The walls of the cabin suddenly felt paper-thin. "They'll kill you," she whispered. "Not tonight," Ryland answered, steady. He turned to her briefly, his gray eyes burning. "Stay low. Whatever happens, don't let them drag you outside." The first shot shattered the night, splintering wood near the doorframe. Ryland fired back, the crack of his revolver swallowed by thunder. The cabin erupted in chaos, gunfire, lightning, rain hammering the roof. Elara dropped to the floor, crawling toward the hearth, where the fire hissed with each drip from the leaking roof. Through the smoke and flashes, she glimpsed Rylan unflinching, a silhouette framed by lightning. He moved with precision, forcing their attackers to stay low behind the fence posts and wagons scattered near the homestead. Still, the odds pressed heavy. Bullets tore through the shutters, showering her with shards of wood. Fear clawed at her throat, but another voice rose louder, Rylan's words from the night before. Chains are heavier in the mind than on the wrists. Her eyes fell on the fireplace poker leaning near the hearth. She seized it, gripping the iron until her knuckles whitened. No, she would not cower. Not again. One of Harlow's men slipped through the back window, landing heavy on the floorboards. Elara spun, her breath ragged. The man grinned, reaching for her arm. There you are, Dove. She swung the poker with every ounce of strength. Iron met bone with a sickening crack. The man dropped, groaning. Her chest heaved, but fire coursed through her veins, an awakening. Rylan glanced back, eyes flashing with something close to pride. Good, he barked over the roar of the storm. Hold your ground! Another volley came from outside. Rylan ducked, fired, and one rider fell with a cry. The others cursed, retreating toward their horses. The man at the doorway, their leader, sneered through the rain. This ain't over. Harlow won't rest till she's back in chains. With that, he mounted and vanished into the downpour, his men scrambling after him. Silence followed, broken only by the storm's rage. Rylan lowered his revolver, shoulders taut. Elara stood trembling, the poker still clutched in her hand, her white dress spattered with soot and rain. You fought, Rylan said, voice rough. Elara lifted her chin. Fear lingered, but it no longer ruled her. I'm done being hunted prey. For a moment, only the storm answered. Then Rylan nodded once, a silent vow in his eyes. Then we'll fight together. The storm broke by morning, leaving the land washed clean yet raw. Puddles shimmered across the plain, and the air smelled of wet earth. Inside the cabin, silence hung heavy. Elara dozed in the corner, the fire reduced to faint embers, while Rylan kept watch at the window. His revolver rested on the sill, his hand never straying far. When Elara stirred, she found him still at his post, jaw set, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. They'll come again, she said, her voice hoarse. Rylan nodded. Not just the men we faced. Harlow himself will ride next. A man like him won't stomach humiliation. The thought chilled her more than the rain-soaked air. Ephraim's pride was legend, his power feared, yet beneath her fear rose defiance. She had faced him once in chains. She would face him again, standing free. By midday, they saddled the stallion and left the ruined cabin behind. The land stretched wide, dotted with sagebrush and glistening pools from the storm. They rode hard, seeking higher ground, where ambush would be harder. Still, Rylan's gaze swept the horizon constantly, every shadow a threat. Near dusk, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. From there, the town of Willow Creek lay distant but visible, its church steeple a pale tooth against the horizon. Elara's breath caught at the sight. She remembered the chains biting her wrists, the congregation's silence as Ephraim paraded her. Anger flared hotter than shame. You're thinking of him, Rylan said, watching her. I'm thinking of who I was that day, Elara replied. How small I felt. How helpless. I won't be her again. A sound cut across her vow, the distant thunder of hooves. Rylan's body tensed. He motioned for her to dismount, leading the stallion into cover among the rocks. Together they crouched, eyes fixed on the valley trail. A column of riders appeared, glinting in the dying Sunday. At their head rode Ephraim Harlow. His fine coat gleamed despite the mud, his hat angled with arrogant precision. Even at a distance, Elara felt the force of his presence, the weight of a man who believed the land itself bent to his will. They've brought more men, Rylan muttered. At least 10 rode with Ephraim, rifles slung across their saddles. He means to finish this quickly. Elara's stomach nodded. Yet when Ephraim halted below, scanning the ridges, she forced herself to meet the sight without flinching. His voice carried on the wind, sharp as a whip. Elara, you think one drifter can keep you from me? Come back now, and I'll forgive this insult. Refuse, and every soul who helps you will pay. Rylan shifted beside her, hand on his revolver. His voice was low, meant for her alone. This is where he shows his true face. Remember it. Remember why you'll never go back. Elara clenched her bruised wrists. Chains or no chains, Ephraim would not break her again. She rose from the rocks, her figure outlined against the sunset, and called down with a voice that trembled yet carried. I will never belong to you. The valley went still. Ephraim's expression darkened, and with a snap of his reins, his riders fanned out like wolves. Rylan stood beside her, revolver ready. Then it begins, he said. And as the sun bled into the horizon, the noose around them tightened. Night pressed heavy over the ridge after Ephraim and his riders disappeared into the valley, their torches flickering like restless spirits. Elara and Rylan waited in the silence that followed, every creak of saddle leather and gust of wind setting their nerves on edge. When the last glow of torches vanished, Rylan led her deeper into the rocks. They found a narrow hollow sheltered from the wind. He built a small fire, its glow faint against the stone walls, careful to keep the flames hidden from prying eyes. Elara sat across from him, drawing the quilt tighter. Her voice broke the quiet. He'll never stop. You saw it in his eyes. Rylan nodded grimly. A man like Harlow doesn't understand losing. To him, it's not about love, it's about power. You humiliated him in front of his town. He'll burn the earth to reclaim his pride. Elara stared into the fire. The flames reminded her of the chapel candles, of her vow stolen before she could speak it. Then I'll have to fight too. Rylan studied her, the firelight painting his face in harsh lines. You've already begun. Last night, you stood your ground. Her fingers tightened around the quilt. I never thought I could. When I swung that poker, it was like I struck at more than just him. I struck every day I let Ephraim tell me I was less than I am. For the first time, a faint smile tugged at Rylan's mouth. That's the kind of fire chains can't kill? Elara looked at him, searching. What about you? You speak of chains as if they never left you. What weight do you carry? He hesitated, then leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. There was a woman once, years back. She believed in me when I didn't deserve it. But I was too proud to stay, too angry to bend. When trouble came, I left her behind. By the time I came back, she was gone. Elara's heart ached at the sorrow in his tone. Gone? Rylan's eyes flickered with pain. Buried. Her family blamed me. Truth is, I blamed me too. Been writing ever since, trying to be the man she thought I was. Silence fell, thick as the canyon walls around them. Elara reached across the fire, her hand brushing his. You can't carry her ghost forever. Saving me won't bring her back. Rylan looked at her then, truly looked, as if weighing the truth in her words. His rough hand closed gently around hers. No, but maybe it'll keep me from losing another soul to a man like Harlow. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly, their joined hands a quiet pact forged in flame and pain. Above them, the sky stretched wide and starless, clouds hiding the moon. In the distance, faint echoes of hoofbeats stirred a reminder that Ephraim's hunt continued. Elara drew closer to the fire, her voice steady now. Then let him come. If this ends tomorrow, I'll face it as a free woman, not a chained bride. Rylan's jaw tightened, but pride flickered in his eyes. Then tomorrow, we will fight together. The fire burned low, but within them both, a fiercer fire had only just begun. The dawn broke red over the valley, a warning painted across the sky. From their perch among the rocks, Elara and Rylan saw dust rising on the horizon. Ephraim's riders, a dozen strong this time, moving with the certainty of wolves closing in. Rylan cinched the stallion's reins tighter. "They'll be here within the hour." His voice carried no fear, only resolve. Elara's pulse quickened, but she squared her shoulders. "Then it ends today." They moved to higher ground, where the ridge narrowed into a choke point. Rylan positioned them with precision, setting stones as cover. His revolver rested easy in his grip, while Elara held the poker she refused to abandon. Its iron darkened from the hearth but solid in her hands. Soon the valley below filled with riders. Ephraim led them, his fine coat glinting, his face twisted in triumph. He reined in, lifting his hand. The riders fanned out, rifles leveled. "Elara," Ephraim's voice rang sharp, "come down now, and I'll forgive your foolishness. This man beside you will die, but I'll spare you more shame." Elara stepped forward, her voice carrying across the rocks. "You don't speak for me anymore. I will never be yours." A ripple of unease spread through the riders. Ephraim's eyes narrowed. "You dare defy me in front of my men?" "She dares because she's free," Rylan called down, voice iron. "And no wealth or whip can change that." Rage twisted Ephraim's features. He jerked his reins, spurring his horse forward. "Then I'll drag her back myself." Gunfire exploded. Rylan fired first, dropping a rifleman from his saddle. The ridge thundered with shots, bullets ricocheting off stone. Elara ducked, heart racing, but kept her grip on the poker. The riders surged upward, their horses scrambling on the rocky incline. Rylan moved with deadly calm, every shot deliberate, every motion shielding Elara. Still, the numbers pressed hard. 2 men broke through the cover, lunging toward her. Elara swung the poker with raw determination. The first man stumbled back, cursing, while the second grabbed for her arm. She struck again, the clang of iron against bone echoing. He fell, groaning in the dust. "Good," Rylan barked, reloading. "Hold your ground." Ephraim himself dismounted, climbing the rocks with a predator's focus. His revolver gleamed, his eyes locked on Elara. "You think a drifter can save you?" he spat. "You'll crawl back to me on your knees before this day ends." Rylan moved to intercept, but Ephraim fired. The bullet grazed Rylan's shoulder, spinning him back. Blood stained his coat, but he stayed standing, teeth clenched. Elara's breath caught. Ephraim advanced on her, chains glinting in his hand, the same she had worn at the altar. "Back where you belong," he snarled. Something inside her broke free. She lifted the poker high, her voice ringing across the ridge. "Never again!" With all her strength, she struck. The iron connected, knocking the chains from Ephraim's grasp. He staggered, rage and disbelief twisting his face. Rylan, wounded but unyielding, raised his revolver and leveled it. His voice was low but final. "It ends here, Harlow." The ridge fell silent. The moment stretched taut as the fate of all 3 hung in the balance. The ridge held its breath. Rylan's revolver never wavered, even as blood trickled from his shoulder. Ephraim Harlow froze where he stood, the chains lying useless at his boots. For the first time, his certainty faltered. "Shoot me, and you'll hang for murder," Ephraim spat, though his voice lacked its usual weight. Rylan's gaze was steady. "I've faced gallows before, but I won't watch another life wasted in your cage." Elara stepped forward, the poker still gripped tight. Her voice carried stronger than it ever had. "This isn't just about me, Ephraim. It's about every person you've crushed under your pride. You built an empire on fear, but today, you lose." The men who had ridden with Ephraim shifted uneasily below. Some lowered their rifles, eyes darting between their master and the woman who stood unflinching before him. "Enough!" Ephraim roared. He lunged for the chains, but Elara kicked them down the slope, metal clattering into the valley. "No!" His scream was swallowed by the wind. That final act of defiance snapped whatever hold he still had. The riders murmured, some turning their horses. Their loyalty to Ephraim bled away like water through sand. Ryland's voice rang out, low but commanding. Go back to town. Tell them the truth. Ephraim Harlow no longer owns Willow Creek or anyone in it. One by one, the riders wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving Ephraim stranded on the ridge, his face contorted with rage. Cowards, you'll regret this! He turned back to Elara, lunging for her once more. But Ryland fired. The shot rang sharp, striking Ephraim's revolver from his hand. The weapon clattered across the rocks. Ephraim fell to his knees, pride shattered, power stripped away. For a moment he seemed smaller than the man who had chained her, just another soul broken by his own greed. Ryland lowered his revolver but kept it ready. Your reign ends here. Go back to your house of empty walls. You'll find it lonelier than any cell. Ephraim's eyes burned with hate, but he staggered to his feet and stumbled down the ridge, vanishing into the valley's shadows. Silence returned. The storm had passed, not just from the sky, but from their lives. Elara dropped the poker, her hands trembling. Tears blurred her vision, not of fear, but of release. Ryland caught her as her knees gave way, holding her against him. It's over, he whispered, voice rough with pain. She lifted her face, meeting his gray eyes. No, she said softly. It's beginning. The words hung between them, fragile yet fierce. A vow unspoken but felt in the very marrow of their bones. Days later, Willow Creek gathered, not in fear, but in hope. The same church that had once bound Elara in chains now saw her walk through its doors unshackled, her head high. Beside her stood Ryland, his arm still in a sling, his presence steady as stone. The townsfolk whispered, but this time in awe, not scorn. Chains had been broken, and in their place stood something stronger, freedom, hard-won and unyielding. On the steps of the chapel, Elara paused. She turned to Ryland, her voice clear. You told me once to walk with you. I will, forever. He smiled, a rare softness breaking through his scars. Then we walked together. The bells tolled again, but now their sound rang like promise, not prison. If you thought one woman's chains could be broken by courage, wait until you see what happens when love itself becomes the strongest weapon of all.